Chapter 1479. Time passed quickly. It had been 60 million years since Yi Chen came to the Heaven Realm. The War of Gods had already ended 20 million years ago. Most people who didn't know the inside story thought that there would be no more War of Gods. They gradually forgot about the tragic battle 20 million years ago. During these 20 million years, Yi Chen never stopped improving. He improved faster and faster. In these 20 million years, Yi Chen had comprehended 800 low-grade skills and 20 mid-grade skills. There was a rumor in the Sword God Palace that if one wanted to comprehend an advanced divine skill, they had to comprehend all the basic and intermediate divine skills. Only then would they have a chance to comprehend an advanced divine skill. The idealistic Sword Saint and the limitless Sword Saint were one of the representatives. The two of them had comprehended all the basic and intermediate divine skills long ago. Yi Chen was still very far away from this goal, thousands of miles away from it. In these 80 million years, he had comprehended 1,000 low-grade skills and 30 mid-grade skills. In 82 million years, Yi Chen's 5 elemental laws finally reached perfection. Is this the perfection of the complementary laws? In his soul sea, the 5 laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were perfect without any flaws. A 5-colored whirlpool appeared between the 5 laws. The speed at which the laws of 5 were produced increased by 100 times. As the laws of 5 reached perfection, Yi Chen felt that the restrictions of the Heaven Realm's primal chaos laws on him had lessened. If I can achieve God laws, the primal chaos laws shouldn't restrict me anymore. Instead, I can resist the primal chaos laws to a certain extent. When I become an over-god, I can even make the primal chaos laws retreat. Over-gods were the kings of true gods. Ordinary true gods were still in great danger when roaming the primal chaos. Only over-gods rarely encountered danger. Over-gods could only be trapped and couldn't be killed. Even the supreme over-god, the chaos over-god, and the primal chaos laws could not kill an over-god. Of course, trapping an over-god for countless years was equivalent to imprisoning an over-god. Thus, the chaos over-god was a transcendent existence in the Heaven Realm and the endless primal chaos. He never participated in the God Wars, but no over-god dared to challenge his authority. The 5 elemental laws reached perfection. Yi Chen successfully passed the 32nd level of the Sword God Pagoda. Only now could he be considered an ultimate Sword Saint. Before this, he had only been an ultimate Battle Saint, much weaker than an ultimate Sword Saint. Of course, there were strong and weak ultimate Sword Saints as well. Yi Chen was one of the stronger ordinary ultimate Sword Saints. After all, Yi Chen had already comprehended 20 mid-level divine techniques, while most ordinary ultimate Sword Saints had only comprehended 10 or so mid-level divine techniques. After 100 million years, Yi Chen finally comprehended all of the primary divine skills. 120 million years later, Yi Chen had comprehended 40 types of mid-level divine skills. In the 150 million years, Yi Chen had comprehended 49 types of mid-level godly skills and was only missing 1 mid-level godly skill. Meanwhile, Yi Chen had passed the 33rd level of the Sword God Pagoda. Just a little bit more and I'll be able to pass the 34th floor. Middle-grade godly skills increased one's strength by too much. The 49th type of middle-grade godly skill was extremely powerful. It was countless times more powerful than the previous middle-grade godly skills. In the 155 million years later, Yi Chen's hard work paid off. He naturally comprehended the 50th type of mid-level godly skill, Rampage. The last primary divine skill is Sword Heart, the last mid-level godly skill is Rampage, and the first high-level godly skill is Sword Heart Rampage. Could these 3 be related? These names were not intentionally given by Yi Chen. In fact, the last primary divine skill was originally called Sword Heart, and the last mid-level godly skill was originally called Rampage. The 3 high-level godly skills also had their own names. Of course, although the names were the same, they were still different when used by different people. The names should be what gave them meaning, not what they looked like. After comprehending Rampage, Yi Chen went to challenge the Sword God Pagoda again. Rampage. With a swing of his sword, the Sword Saint puppet on the 34th level of the Sword God Pagoda seemed to be frozen in place. An unparalleled sword aura swept across its body, leaving behind thousands of fragments. Following that, the fragments were turned into ashes. He passed the 34th level of the Sword God Pagoda. In the 160th million years later, a war broke out again. This time, it was an all-out war. The Sword God Celestial System and the Demon Celestial System were all mobilized. In the sky, the Sword God Celestial System and the Demon Celestial System's true God stars also started to approach the Twilight Plane. Once they got close, it would be the time for the true God battle. In the Twilight Plane, blood dyed the ground, and corpses piled up like mountains. Hundreds of millions of battle sages fought against each other. Everyone seemed to have gone crazy, and all of them were unafraid of death. What a terrifying battlefield atmosphere! Yi Chen couldn't help but change his expression. He could feel that the Twilight Plane was enveloped by a terrifying battlefield atmosphere. Anyone who entered would be affected, and the affected battle sages would no longer fear death. His good friends, the Sweet Dew Sword Saint, the Shadowless Sword Saint, the Radiant Star Sword Saint, and the Scarlet Cloud Sword Saint, were affected, and their eyes turned blood red. Only the Ultimate Battle Sages and Ultimate Sword Saints were not affected, or were only slightly affected. This is the ultimate divine battle. Yi Chen seemed to see everyone's dusk, and it was extremely miserable. Raising his head, Yi Chen saw the true God stars. One had to know that in the past, the Twilight Plane had never seen the sun or the true God stars. Then let's kill. A divine battle was fate, and it was also the shortcut to becoming a true god. There were no other techniques. Every time Yi Chen used his sword, it would be the strongest mid-level divine technique rampage. Unparalleled sword chi swept past, and a river of blood appeared in front of him. It was unknown how many Demon Celestial System battle sages died at the hands of Yi Chen. It's him. In the distance, Battle Sage Yi He saw Yi Chen. Without any hesitation, Battle Sage Yi He immediately turned and fled. At this moment, he was no match for Yi Chen. As an ultimate battle sage, he would not be affected by the atmosphere of the battlefield. Do you think you can escape? With a flash of sword light, Yi Chen arrived in the air above Battle Sage Yi He and swept his sword down. Pu. Battle Sage Yi He was dead. In the following years, Yi Chen killed the ultimate battle sage of Demonic Beast Mountain, Giant Hammer Battle Sage. Back then, these two ultimate battle sages were above Yi Chen, but now, they could not even take a single strike from Yi Chen. After passing the 34th level of the Sword God Pagoda, Yi Chen was 2 levels stronger than ordinary ultimate sword sages and 3 levels stronger than ordinary ultimate battle sages. They were not on the same level at all. The situation became more and more desperate. Even the ultimate sword sages of Sword God Palace were in danger. After more than 100 million years, the number of battle sages of Demon Celestial Palace with bloodline god skills had increased. In Yi Chen's vision, 2 ultimate sword sages were in danger. One was Sword Sage Snowheart, and the other was Sword Sage Lian Cheng. Sword Sage Snowheart had once saved Yi Chen's life. Sword Sage Lian Cheng did not have much interaction with Yi Chen. I can only save one. Yi Chen frowned. His figure flashed, and he flew in the direction of Sword Sage Snowheart. Between the two, he could only choose Sword Sage Snowheart. Be careful. Seeing that Yi Chen was coming to help, Sword Sage Snowheart hurriedly reminded him. Her opponent was not an ordinary ultimate battle sage, but a bloodline battle sage. You saved my life back then. Now, I'm returning the favor. I still owe you one more life. Yi Chen turned around and smiled at Sword Sage Snowheart. He charged toward the bloodline battle sage. With a flash of sword chi, the bloodline battle sage was split into 2. The strength of a bloodline battle sage depended on how strong they were before the fusion. Interesting. Sword Sage Snowheart smiled. After this ultimate battle, perhaps another idealistic sword sage and peerless sword sage would be born. Chapter 1480. Yi Chen, who had perfected the 5 elemental laws and comprehended the final mid-grade divine skill, Rampage, was too powerful. Even in the Sword God Palace, he was one of the top existences. The ultimate sword saints of the Sword God Palace were usually divided into 4 levels. The first level was the idealistic sword saint and the invincible sword saint. The second level was the level of Yi Chen. The third level was the mid-grade ultimate sword saint, such as the Sunset Spirit Sword Saint. The fourth level was the ordinary ultimate sword saint, such as the Snowheart Sword Saint. Of course, there were still differences between the same level. For example, the gap between the idealistic sword saint and the invincible sword saint was huge. According to the invincible sword saint, he couldn't even block one strike from the idealistic sword saint. Even though he was being humble, the idealistic sword saint was indeed very powerful. Otherwise, there was no need for the invincible sword saint to praise others and belittle himself. At the rear of the battlefield, Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng were also participating in the battle. There were also some familiar faces like Du Guju. They had already become mid-grade demigods. In the Heaven Realm, their innate talent was very good. However, in the Heaven Realm, their innate talent was only ordinary. Without a fated encounter, it would take them a long time to break through to the next level. It was already very difficult for them to become mid-grade demigods. They couldn't improve rapidly like Yi Chen. Although Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng were only mid-grade demigods, which were mid-grade battle sages, they were fully armed. They were wearing 9-star Sky Saint armor and holding 9-star Sky Saint weapons. In the past, it was extremely difficult for him to obtain divine stones. But now, with his strength, he didn't lack divine stones at all, let alone contribution points. Wanting to obtain a few 9-star Sky Saint artifacts was as easy as eating and drinking. Besides, the most important thing was that the two of them were pregnant with Yi Chen's child. A demigod's pregnancy required a long time, unlike a mortal's 10 months. A low-grade demigod's pregnancy required at least 1,000,000 years, and a mid-grade demigod's pregnancy required 10 million years. Having Yi Chen's child was equivalent to having Yi Chen's bloodline. This bloodline would protect the two of them at a critical moment. With this, Yi Chen could rest assured that they would stay at the rear of the battlefield. King against king, general against general, soldier against soldier. The situation on the Twilight Plains had reached a stalemate. Apart from the countless battle sages and sword sages who had fallen in the beginning, the rate of deaths had actually slowed down. After all, in a situation where both sides were evenly matched, it would take a long time to finish off the other side. It could take a day or two, or even 10 days or half a month. Once he got rid of his opponent, there would be another massacre until he found a second opponent. In the center of the Twilight Plains, this was the grandest battlefield. Even the weakest of those who could fight here were ordinary ultimate battle saints. This was because the top forces of both sides were gathered here. Everyone understood that as long as the top forces of the other side were taken care of, no matter how many of them there were, they would all be useless. Green Lotus Sword Saint, let's join forces. The one who spoke was the Black Rock Sword Saint. The Black Rock Sword Saint was the same as Yi Chen, a second-tier ultimate sword saint. He was slightly weaker than Yi Chen, but not by much. He had already comprehended 45 mid-tier divine skills. All right. Yi Chen nodded. Their opponent was a bloodline battle saint. It was a fusion of 2 intermediate ultimate battle saints and 2 ordinary ultimate battle saints. Its strength was even stronger than Yi Chen's. Haha, we have directly fused together. You are just cooperating with each other. How can you be a match for us? The bloodline battle saint swooped down, plowing a deep trench in the ground. Go. Yi Chen and the Black Rock Sword Saint charged forward, one on the left and one on the right. The first to attack was the Black Rock Sword Saint. He raised his black greatsword high and slashed out. Black sword chi strangled the bloodline battle saint's body like a millstone. However, the bloodline battle saint's defense was too strong. When the sword chi strangled the bloodline battle saint, it only produced countless sparks, not even a white mark. However, it was not completely useless. At least it slowed down the bloodline battle saint and caused him to pause. Crisscross. Holding the 5-element sword, Yi Chen slashed out, and an unparalleled sword chi brushed past the bloodline battle saint's body. Pu. A large amount of blood flew out. The bloodline battle saint was injured. In terms of attack power, Yi Chen was much stronger than the Black Rock Sword Saint. After all, Yi Chen had comprehended the last intermediate divine skill. Damn it, Great Destruction Axe. The Bloodline Battle Saint's weapon was a blood-red axe. With a swing of the axe light split the sky and the earth. The Black Rock Sword Saint was directly sent flying, and Yi Chen was also forced to retreat. The ground was a mess. Fusion is indeed not something that can be matched by cooperation. Yi Chen frowned slightly. Fusion was a superposition of strength, and it was already amazing that the cooperation could double the effect. The Bloodline Battle Saint was only slightly stronger than Yi Chen. He thought that with the Black Rock Sword Saint, they should be able to contend, but they were still slightly weaker. Die. The Bloodline Battle Saint's attack became more and more violent, not giving the two a chance to fight back. The Black Rock Sword Saint spat out blood continuously, and his primordial spirit was injured. Yi Chen could hold on, but unfortunately, he could not find a chance to defeat his opponent. With his attack power, it would be very difficult for him to defeat his opponent. His full strength attack could only injure his opponent slightly. Of course, he was not weak either, and it would be difficult for his opponent to injure him. Black Rock Sword Saint, step back. Leave this to me. The Green Lotus Sword Saint said to the Black Rock Sword Saint. Okay. Although the Black Rock Sword Saint was very unhappy, he knew that it was useless for him to stay. Since even the Black Rock Sword Saint could not help him, there was almost no one else who could help him. It was useless to rely on more people. After all, he was not the only one in trouble. The Bloodline Battle Saint of the Demon God Palace was indeed a trump card, enough to change the direction of the God Wars. Haha, when we fuse together, our endurance is beyond your imagination. Let's see how long you can last. The Bloodline Battle Saint laughed wildly. 1 week passed. 1 month passed. Yi Chen was gradually losing. In the blink of an eye, 1 year passed. This was the longest battle that Yi Chen had ever experienced. Yi Chen's mouth was bleeding, and his primordial spirit was beginning to be injured. Die, 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 die. The Bloodline Battle Saint was suppressing Yi Chen. It's not certain who will die. An astonishing sword intent suddenly erupted from Yi Chen's body. It was not just one sword intent, but 3. The 3 supreme sword intents intertwined, creating an unprecedented resonance. A year of difficult battles had once again allowed Yi Chen's potential to explode. It should be known that the 3 supreme sword intents were resonating all the time, but their progress was getting slower and slower. However, after more than 100 million years, the 3 supreme sword intents were gradually approaching perfection. All they needed was an opportunity to temper themselves. Boom. Finally, the 3 supreme sword intents broke through to perfection and merged with his divine power, causing Yi Chen's divine power to be strengthened countless times. Before this, Yi Chen's divine power was already at the level of an ultimate sword saint. At this time, Yi Chen's divine power had surpassed that of an ultimate sword saint. This was because no ultimate sword saint had 3 supreme sword intents. At most, they had 2, such as the solitary sword saint and the absolute sword saint. His sword intents had reached perfection, and so had Yi Chen's divine power. Coupled with the 5 elemental laws, the current Yi Chen was truly an ultimate sword saint. Chapter 1481. It was still a mid-level divine skill, but this time, it was more than 10,000 times stronger than before. The broadsword Qi seemed to be able to destroy the world as it swept along the body of the Bloodline Battle Saint. Without a sound, the body of the Bloodline Battle Saint was annihilated into nothingness. However, this was not the end. The remaining sword Qi was still extremely terrifying. It swept in a straight line, and wherever it went, everything was annihilated. It was hazy, and even time and space were distorted. So powerful. Even the Supreme Sword Saint is only this powerful. This is too domineering. The Supreme Sword Saint is superior in his advanced divine skill, and the Green Lotus Sword Saint is superior in his terrifying divine power. This divine power is unimaginable. How can a sword saint have such a domineering divine power? The sword saints of the Sword God Palace were surprised. The rise of the Green Lotus Sword Saint gave them a higher chance of winning. From now on, the Sword God Palace would have 3 ultimate Sword Saints: the Idealistic Sword Saint, the Supreme Sword Saint, and the Green Lotus Sword Saint. Puff, 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 puff. Yi Chen, whose strength had greatly increased, was invincible. Basically, no one was his match. Dang! Dazzling sparks soared into the sky. Yi Chen's attack was blocked. The one who attacked was a Sword Saint, one of the 2 ultimate battle saints of the Demon God Palace, the Demon Sword Saint. The Dragon Scale Demon Saint was only slightly weaker than the Supreme Sword Saint, and the Demon Sword Saint was slightly weaker than the Dragon Scale Demon Saint. Yi Chen's strength would not exceed the Supreme Sword Saint's, so the strength of the 4 was about the same. Dark Sword Intent and Light Sword Intent. Yi Chen immediately determined that the Demon Sword Saint had comprehended the Supreme Sword Intent, Dark Sword Intent, and Light Sword Intent. There were 5 types of Supreme Sword Intents: destruction, immortality, darkness, light, and chaos. Yi Chen had already comprehended the 3 Supreme Sword Intents: destruction, immortality, and light. He only lacked 2 Supreme Sword Intents: darkness and chaos. Chaos Sword Intent was the most special. It existed between destruction, immortality, darkness, and light. It didn't have any specific attribute, because it was chaos itself. Therefore, once he comprehended the Chaos Sword Intent in advance, he wouldn't be able to comprehend the previous 4 Supreme Sword Intents. To a certain extent, it was the opposite of the previous 4 Supreme Sword Intents. It represented disorder and the collapse of order. On the other hand, the Dark Sword Intent and the Light Sword Intent were opposites. The Light Sword Intent could see through all secrets, while the Dark Sword Intent could hide all secrets. If one could comprehend both sword intents at the same time, others would no longer be able to sense the trajectory of one's attacks. The Demonic Sword Saint's attack was so sudden that even Yi Chen was taken aback. Of course, Yi Chen was only surprised for a moment. The other party had the Darkness Sword Intent and the Radiant Sword Intent, and he was stronger than the other party, having comprehended the Destruction, Immortality, and Radiant Sword Intents. There was no need for him to fear the other party. Dang dang dang. Dazzling sparks flashed in the sky, and the 2 figures seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Is this the Darkness Sword Intent? In the process of fighting, Yi Chen carefully sensed the uniqueness of the Darkness Sword Intent. He wanted to borrow the Demonic Sword Saint's hand to comprehend the Darkness Sword Intent. Once he comprehended the Darkness Sword Intent, he would possess the 4 Great Sword Intents, and his God Force would rise to a whole new level, reaching an unprecedented level. Strands. The Demonic Sword Saint's strength was slightly weaker than Yi Chen's, but if Yi Chen wanted to defeat the other party, it wouldn't be something that could be done in a day. Moreover, Yi Chen didn't plan to defeat the other party so quickly. He needed to comprehend the Darkness Sword Intent first. As time passed, a strand of Darkness Sword Intent finally formed in Yi Chen's Soul Sea. At first, this strand of Darkness Sword Intent wasn't enough to form the Darkness Sword Soul. But as the battle continued, the Darkness Sword Intent grew stronger and stronger, eventually forming a Tier 1 Sword Soul, followed by Tier 2, Tier 3, several years passed, and the Darkness Sword Intent reached early stage Tier 9. The reason why it could improve so quickly was because Yi Chen's cultivation level was too high. The other 3 Great Sword Intents were all perfected, and he himself was an ultimate Sword Saint. If he were in the Heaven-Earth cosmos, he wouldn't be able to improve so quickly. At the very least, he would need thousands or even tens of thousands of years to reach Tier 9. Although the Darkness Sword Intent was already at Tier 9, Yi Chen didn't fuse it with his God Force. He didn't want to alert the Demonic Sword Saint. If the other party realized that he was using him to comprehend the Darkness Sword Intent, he would definitely leave. Without the Demonic Sword Saint, if Yi Chen wanted to continue improving the Darkness Sword Intent, it would take a long time. Mid-stage Tier 9. Late stage Tier 9. Unknowingly, Yi Chen and the Demonic Sword Saint had been fighting for hundreds of years. Yi Chen used the Demonic Sword Saint to comprehend the Darkness Sword Intent, and the Demonic Sword Saint also used Yi Chen to comprehend the essence of the Sword Dao. After all, The demon god wasn't a sword god and couldn't provide much help to the demonic sword saint in terms of the sword Dao. Therefore, the demonic sword saint loved to fight with the ultimate sword saint of the sword god palace and absorb the essence of the sword Dao. On the other side, the demonic sword saint was also fighting with the peerless sword saint. The peerless sword saint had the advantage in terms of his god force, while the demonic sword saint had the advantage in terms of his great demon king bloodline, which had been developed to the extreme. As a bloodline created by the demon god, once the great demon king bloodline was developed to the extreme, it would be equivalent to a weapon of war, and its body would be extraordinarily strong. Peerless sword saint, you are indeed stronger than me. Unfortunately, you must die today. The demonic sword saint let out a loud roar, and two ultimate battle sages of the demon god palace suddenly appeared beside him. Black light surged, and the three of them fused together to form a bloodline battle sage. This bloodline battle sage was 50% similar to the demonic sword saint, except that he was twice as tall, and his ferocious aura was also more than twice as strong. He looked abnormally ferocious. Peerless sword saint, die. The demonic sword saint, who had transformed into a bloodline battle sage, flashed and charged at the peerless sword saint. His speed was so fast that it surpassed the peerless sword saint's reaction. A punch landed on the peerless sword saint's abdomen, and the peerless sword saint was sent flying high into the air. However, this was not the end. The demonic sword saint caught up to the peerless sword saint, who had been thrown into the air, and clawed at the peerless sword saint's back, leaving a deep bloody mark. The peerless sword saint, who had the upper hand, was now at a complete disadvantage. He had no way of fighting back. On Yi Chen's side, the situation that had been evenly matched also changed. The demonic sword saint seemed to have noticed Yi Chen's abnormality and felt that it would not be good for him to continue fighting. This is the end. Not wanting to continue fighting, the demonic sword saint waved his hand, and two ultimate battle sages of the demon god palace appeared beside him. These two ultimate battle sages had been hiding in the demonic sword saint's space of light and darkness. At the crucial moment, they could quickly fuse into a bloodline battle sage to prevent any accidents. After using the bloodline divine skill, the demonic sword saint fused with the two ultimate battle sages of the demon god palace, and his strength increased by many times. Yi Chen was caught off guard and was hit several hundred times in a row. He could not react at all. This won't do. Sensing that his Yuanshan was being damaged, Yi Chen could no longer hide his darkness sword intent. With a thought, the late-stage 9th Order darkness sword intent merged with his divine power, causing the quality of his divine power to increase once again. Whoosh! With his divine power becoming stronger, Yi Chen barely managed to exchange blows with the demonic sword saint and was sent flying. Along the way, he changed his trajectory and dodged another attack from the demonic sword saint. Chapter 1482. After all, the late-stage 9th tier darkness sword intent wasn't the perfect one. It didn't give Yi Chen a huge boost in strength, and it didn't allow Yi Chen to reverse the situation. No wonder. So he was making use of me to comprehend the darkness sword intent. Sensing the changes in Yi Chen's god force, how could the demon sword saint not understand Yi Chen's goal? He was enraged and his attacks became even more ferocious. Sword like ink, sword like tides. The demon sword saint didn't choose the strongest technique but chose the one with the widest range, making it impossible for Yi Chen to dodge. Pu. Spurting out a mouthful of fresh blood, Yi Chen's chest was pierced once more. If the fusion of his god force with the late-stage 9th tier darkness sword intent increased Yi Chen's strength by 100 times, the demon sword saint's strength increased by at least 1,000 times. Although he wouldn't be insta-killed, he would definitely die if the battle dragged on. Suffering heavy blows again and again, Yi Chen suddenly felt the world stop. In his mind, the first high-grade divine inscription diagram flickered unceasingly, as though something was about to be born. Abruptly, a bright light flashed as Yi Chen subconsciously slashed out with his sword. Dang! Sparks flew as the demon sword saint was flung backwards. The might of Yi Chen's sword strike earlier was too great, and the demon sword saint felt his arm going numb as his blood and chi surged. What? The demon sword saint stared at Yi Chen as he recalled the scene earlier. High-grade divine art? The demon sword saint frowned, feeling uncertain. Is this the crisscrossing sword heart? Yi Chen regained his senses as a look of contemplation appeared on his face. Over 100 million years, Yi Chen had exchanged for all 3 high-grade divine inscriptions. Although he couldn't comprehend them in a short period of time, he was able to memorize every stroke of the divine inscription. Every detail was engraved in his mind, and at the most crucial moment, he would be able to comprehend a trace of enlightenment. Hard work paid off. Perhaps it was because he had seen the Supreme Sword Saint use the crisscrossing sword heart countless times, or perhaps it was because his own realm was high enough, but under the pressure of the Demon Sword Saint, Yi Chen easily comprehended the first high-level sword technique, the crisscrossing sword heart. The crisscrossing sword heart didn't have any specific moves. It was a kind of power that came from the soul. If one could comprehend it, then they would comprehend it. If one couldn't comprehend it, then they would never comprehend it. Once they comprehended the crisscrossing sword heart, even the most ordinary sword moves would be able to burst forth with astonishing power. After comprehending the crisscrossing sword heart, Yi Chen had officially surpassed the peerless sword saint in all aspects and was now catching up to the idealistic sword saint. Again, I don't believe it. The demon sword saint refused to believe it. He pounced at Yi Chen once more. The black demonic sword danced in an airtight manner, blanketing the sky as it enveloped Yi Chen with a powerful aura. Open. With a wave of the 5-element sword, the sky full of black sword shadows was torn apart. Stretching his body, Yi Chen launched a counterattack against the demon sword saint who had transformed into a bloodline battle sage for the first time. Kai, 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 Kai. The demon sword saint felt so uncomfortable that he wanted to vomit blood. He could clearly react with his mind, but his body couldn't keep up. His body was struck 5 times in a row, and each sword passed through his body. Crisscrossing sword heart, only I am undefeated. In the beginning, Yi Chen was still a bit unfamiliar with the crisscrossing sword heart. However, as time passed, Yi Chen gradually understood the true meaning of the crisscrossing sword heart. A person could be defeated, but the heart could not. If the heart was undefeated, then nothing in this world could make one lose. It was mysterious and contained the ultimate truth of the sword Tao. Sometimes, the true truth itself was very simple. As the saying went, the great Tao was the simplest. How is this possible? I've fused with 2 ultimate battle sages, yet I'm still not his opponent. The demon sword saint was both shocked and angry. Yi Chen had completed the reversal, but the peerless sword saint wasn't so lucky. Peerless sword saint, today will be the day you die. The dragon-scale demon sage occasionally tore open the peerless sword saint's throat with a claw, and at other times, punched a hole through the peerless sword saint's abdomen. Many ultimate sword saints nearby couldn't help but want to help. However, the dragon-scale demon sage, who had transformed into a bloodline battle sage, was extremely powerful. With a wave of his hand, the ultimate sword saints that rushed over immediately turned into ashes. Haha, even if the idealistic sword saint appears, it won't help. The dragon-scale demon sage raised his head and laughed. Is that so? As soon as the dragon-scale demon sage finished speaking, an inconspicuous ultimate sword saint suddenly spoke. His voice wasn't loud, and in this noisy environment, it should have been easy to ignore him. However, for some reason, his voice attracted everyone's attention. It's the grass bamboo sword saint. Grass bamboo sword saint, what happened to you? The sword saints were inexplicably shocked. The grass bamboo sword saint was an ordinary ultimate sword saint in the sword god palace. He was a very low-key person and didn't have many friends. Your strength is about the same as mine, yet you dare to be so arrogant. The grass bamboo sword saint's opponent was somewhat disdainful. He thought that the grass bamboo sword saint had lost his mind. Taking advantage of the grass bamboo sword saint's distraction, he suddenly charged over, wanting to launch a sneak attack on the grass bamboo sword saint. Pu. The grass bamboo sword saint seemed to have changed into a different person. He was calm and magnanimous, and a trace of extreme dominance was hidden in his temperament. With a glare, 2 beams of light flashed, and the ultimate battle saint from the demon god palace exploded. He killed an ordinary ultimate battle saint with just his gaze. Even the limitless sword saint couldn't compare to such strength. Everyone was stunned, and their mouths were wide open. The idealistic sword saint. The limitless sword saint revealed a look of realization. The idealistic sword saint, it's you. The dragon-scale demon sage was the second to react, and he shouted. So it's the idealistic sword saint. This is great. I was wondering why the idealistic sword saint didn't appear. It turns out that he has always been by our side, but we couldn't discover him. Yes, the idealistic sword saint should be observing something. That's why he hasn't shown himself. As long as the idealistic sword saint is here, we will definitely win. The sword saints discussed animatedly, and their faces were filled with joy. He's the idealistic sword saint. From afar, Yi Chen saw the idealistic sword saint. He didn't know why, but the idealistic sword saint gave him a very familiar feeling. However, he knew very well that the two of them had never met before. As if they had a telepathic connection, the idealistic sword saint also looked at Yi Chen in the distance, and a trace of doubt appeared in his eyes. The idealistic sword saint, so what if you're here? With your strength, you're at most on par with me. The dragon-scale demon sage was very confident. The idealistic sword saint was indeed very strong, ridiculously strong. He could almost defeat the limitless sword saint and the dragon-scale demon sage before transforming into a bloodline battle saint. However, this was before transforming into a bloodline battle saint. After transforming into a bloodline battle saint, the dragon-scale demon sage felt as if he had become a god, and his strength was about to explode. Whether it's true or not, we'll know once we try. The idealistic sword saint smiled faintly, and his body suddenly emitted a sword intent that was like a breeze. This sword intent was faint and illusory, as if it came from beyond the 9 heavens. Although it wasn't very powerful, it was enough to make one's soul tremble. Have a taste of my Sword God Palace's second advanced sword technique, sword traversing taishu. The idealistic sword saint disappeared and was replaced by a wisp of sword light, an illusory, formless, and colorless sword light. Chapter 1483. Seeing the appearance of this sword ray, the demon sage's expression changed drastically. He could feel that this sword ray was a great threat to him. It could severely injure or even kill him. The moment the sword ray appeared, the demon sage even thought that he had been locked on by a true god. Of course, that was only a momentary illusion. The lock-on of a true god was far more terrifying than this. It's the roaming sword of the void. I remember that in the previous War of Gods, he had only managed to comprehend the surface of the roaming sword of the void. Looking at this scene, he should have mastered the roaming sword of the void. The limitless sword sage had a look of admiration on his face. He was also comprehending swimming sword taishu, but he could not find the threshold. If he could not even find the threshold, he naturally could not comprehend it. If he could comprehend swimming sword taishu, it would be impossible for the demon sage, who had transformed into a bloodline battle sage, to defeat him. An instant was an eternity. The sword ray formed by the idealistic sword sage moved. Like a stream of air, the sword ray swept across the demon sage's body under everyone's gaze. Fat. The demon sage's body was cut in half. His face was filled with astonishment. He could not react at all. Fat. 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 Again and again, the power of the sword ray was extremely strong. After breaking free from the restraints of the human body, the sword ray was the human and the human was the sword ray. There was no distinction between them. It was as if the sword had a human nature. It was no longer affected by space or timing. This was the true meaning of becoming one with the sword. The essence of swimming sword taishu was becoming one with the sword. Idealistic sword sage, do you think you have one? The reason why I did not kill the limitless sword sage so quickly was to force you out. The demon sage, who had been cut into thousands of pieces, laughed. 3 ultimate battle sages of the demon celestial palace suddenly appeared. They exploded into pieces of flesh and merged with the demon sage's flesh. Countless pieces of flesh moved closer to the center, as if a huge ball of flesh was shrinking. The sword ray formed by the idealistic sword sage became slower and slower. If it was like cutting cheese and tofu at the beginning, it was like cutting rock and steel now. The resistance increased rapidly. Kai. The sword light once again pierced through the ball of flesh. The idealistic sword saint stopped attacking and watched from afar. At that moment, the ball of flesh was only several meters wide, and it was incredibly dense. Waves of resplendent godly power burst forth, as if countless stars had gathered together and were compressed to a size of several meters. The space-time of the twilight planes started to collapse. 6 in 1. The idealistic sword saint transformed from a sword gleam into a human form. According to his observations, the demon god palace's bloodline divine skill could only fuse with 6 battle saints at most, not more than 1. He originally thought that the more powerful the demon god palace was, the fewer battle saints it could fuse with. Who would have thought that it was just a disguise? No one knew how powerful the fusion of 6 different godly powers would be. The meatball wriggled, and the heterogeneous godly powers began to fuse together. In the next moment, a bloodline battle sage that looked somewhat similar to the dragon-scaled demon sage appeared. This was a bloodline battle sage that was 5 meters tall. Its body was covered in spikes and dragon scales. There was also a curved horn on its chin, and its eyes were compound. Boom! The dragon-scaled demon sage punched the ground, and the violent shockwave tore apart the bodies of dozens of ultimate sword sages. The idealistic sword saint was also sent flying, and he spat out a large amount of flesh and blood. His martial Yuan spirit was severely injured. Idealistic sword saint, today will be the day your legend breaks. The dragon-scaled demon sage roared and punched toward the idealistic sword saint. Catcher. The space-time of the twilight planes shattered. It was as if a huge crystal had a crack in the middle, and the idealistic sword saint was at the center of the interweaving cracks. The twilight planes were shrouded in the laws of dusk. To shatter the space-time here, one would need the power of a true god. No one present thought that the dragon-scaled demon sage had the power of a true god, but it was still extremely terrifying, far surpassing the concept of a demigod. If one had to describe it, it would be a quasi-god. Since the space-time of the twilight planes had shattered, the idealistic sword saint's body should have shattered as well. However, that was not the case. The idealistic sword saint's body twisted a lot, but it did not shatter. His divine power was extremely strange. It was like paste, yet also like glue, sticking the shattered space-time cracks together. It was just that the space-time fragments had been dislocated, causing the idealistic sword saint's body to be dislocated as well. At this moment, the idealistic sword saint and the surrounding space-time gave off a feeling of chaos and disorder. Chaos sword intent and darkness sword intent. Yi Chen was surprised by the idealistic sword saint's sword intent. He did not expect the idealistic sword saint to have comprehended the darkness sword intent and the chaos sword intent, the strongest of the 5 supreme sword intents. As a sword saint of the sword god palace, he did not comprehend the immortal sword intent or the radiant sword intent. Instead, he comprehended the darkness sword intent and the chaos sword intent. Yet, he did not give off an evil feeling. This made Yi Chen feel strange and puzzled. Whoosh! Maintaining the shattered spacetime, the idealistic sword saint transformed into a sword gleam and left the shattered spacetime. Did you have a good time fighting me? Opposite Yi Chen, the demonic sword saint smiled coldly. 3 ultimate battle sages of the demon god palace appeared beside him. Immediately after, these 3 ultimate battle sages fused into his body. Just like the long-scale demon saint, the demonic sword saint could also fuse with 5 ultimate battle sages. Including himself, there were 6 ultimate battle sages. 3 ultimate battle sages and 6 ultimate battle sages. The difference in numbers was double, but the difference in power was 1,000 times. His flesh expanded, and the demonic sword saint transformed into a bloodline battle sage with extremely well-developed upper limbs. He looked somewhat similar to the demonic sword saint. His legs were very slender and looked extremely explosive. Whoosh! The black sword danced, and spacetime was sliced apart. It was as if a fan-shaped section had appeared in the center of a crystal, and Yi Chen's body was stuck in the fan-shaped section. In terms of godly power, Yi Chen's godly power was even stronger than the idealistic sword saint's. Therefore, this sword that could slice apart spacetime was unable to cut through Yi Chen's body. It only caused a sharp wound to appear on his body. Sword traversing Taishu. Yi Chen's body twisted, and his entire body seemed to have transformed into a wisp of sword light as he broke free from the shackles. For some reason, just by seeing the idealistic sword saint use the second high-level godly sword technique, sword traversing Taishu, Yi Chen had a deep understanding of it. He tried to use it and actually managed to do it, even though it was still very immature and superficial. In the sky, Yi Chen and the demonic sword saint faced each other from afar. The idealistic sword saint and the long-scale demon saint faced each other from afar. Even higher up in the sky, the sun and the stars mixed together. It was rare for the twilight plains to be bathed in sunlight and dazzling stars. However, such a beautiful scene would only cause everyone to sink into an atmosphere of mass extinction. A battle of gods was not a joke, and the ultimate battle of gods was even more so. Boom! All of a sudden, the sky shook violently. Immediately after, a star dimmed. After an unknown amount of time, a huge corpse fell from the sky and smashed into the twilight plains, causing waves of destructive earthquakes. A true god had fallen. Sword god, so you've already passed away. In that case, there's no need for your sword god divine branch to exist anymore. A vast and deafening voice spread throughout the entire twilight plains. Chapter 1484. Demon God, let me, the desolate god, fight you. The stars in the sky shifted, and a huge star approached the sun represented by the demon god. The one who had just fallen was a true god from the sword god celestial system. Without the sword god, no one could stop the demon god. The desolate god was one of the top few true gods in the sword god celestial system, so he thought that he could stop the demon god. Boom! The sun and the star collided, and the twilight plain became even darker. The sunlight and starlight that filled the sky had long been intercepted by the shattered space and shifted to some unknown place. Catcher! In the sky, a foot suddenly landed, and the twilight plain caved in for tens of thousands of miles. God knew how many battle saints and sword saints were trampled to death. Soon, the knee of the foot bent, and with a sudden bounce, it disappeared. Demon God, come again. It turned out that the foot that landed was the desolate god. After all, he was not a main god. He dared to fight with the demon god because he had a strong divine body. However, after a few moves, he was beaten to the twilight plain by the demon god. The true gods were fighting in the sky, and the demigods were fighting on the twilight plain. Both heaven and man were angry, and the law of dusk was getting thicker and thicker. Sword swimming Taishu. Yi Chen performed sword swimming Taishu again and again. In the beginning, Yi Chen was not a match for the demon sword saint, who had 6 in 1. No matter how sharp the sword light was, it would be blown away by the demon sword saint's sword. However, after a few hundred times, Yi Chen's sword swimming Taishu became more and more perfect. Even he himself did not know why he could learn and perfect sword swimming Taishu so quickly. Could it be that he had learned all the beginner and intermediate sword skills? But the absolute sword saint and the idealistic sword saint had learned all the beginner and intermediate sword skills a long time ago, and yet they had not mastered sword swimming Taishu in such a short time. Maybe my comprehension is also unique in the heaven realm. Yi Chen naturally knew that his greatest advantage was his perception. When he was young, Yi Chen's cultivation talent was not particularly outstanding. However, his perception was extremely high, and he could easily cultivate his cultivation technique to the highest realm. The higher the realm of his cultivation technique, the faster his cultivation speed would naturally increase. Therefore, although his cultivation talent was not particularly outstanding, his cultivation speed was faster than those with outstanding cultivation talent. The reason why Yi Chen could reach where he was today was all because of his comprehensive ability. Without it, he would not even be as good as Dugu Ju. Perhaps, he would have died of old age in the true spirit continent countless years ago, never to see the outside world again. Dang dang dang. After exchanging over 1,000 blows, Yi Chen managed to barely block the demon sword saint's attacks. This was not entirely because of sword swimming Taishu, but also because of the crisscrossing sword heart. The crisscrossing sword heart could increase the power of any martial skill, and sword swimming Taishu was also one of them. Sword swimming Taishu was the second highest level sword art, and its power was already frightening enough. After the enhancement of the crisscrossing sword heart, its power continued to increase. It would not be an exaggeration for it to be able to block the demon sword saint, who was almost at the level of quasi-god. Impossible. Demon sword saint increased the intensity of his attacks. His frightening divine power caused even the space-time to warp and shake. He believed that apart from true gods and demonic Saint Dragonscale, no one could be his opponent. However, Yi Chen was unexpectedly able to block him. Moreover, this guy's strength had risen too fast. In such a short time, he had comprehended 2 high-grade sword Dao divine skills. How could he let others live? How could he let others live? Fortunately, Dragon Scale Demon Saint's battle went smoothly. The idealistic sword saint was suppressed the whole time. In terms of divine skills, the idealistic sword saint was superior to Yi Chen, but in terms of divine power, the idealistic sword saint was much weaker than Yi Chen. Idealistic sword saint had comprehended the chaos sword intent and darkness sword intent, while Yi Chen had comprehended the 4 supreme sword intents. Only the chaos sword intent was missing. Although the chaos sword intent was the head of the 5 supreme sword intents, it could only offset 2 of Yi Chen's supreme sword intents. It was still missing 1 supreme sword intent. Idealistic sword saint, I didn't expect the title of number 1 sword saint of Sword God Palace to change hands. But it doesn't matter. After I kill you, I will kill him together with the demon sword saint. The Dragon Scale Demon Saint also saw the situation on the demon sword saint side. Yi Chen's power shocked him. The idealistic sword saint was powerful enough, but this guy was even more powerful. Sword God Palace was really a group of monsters. However, from now on, there would be no more Sword God Palace. Their Demon God Palace would dominate the Heaven Realm. It's just a title. I don't care about it anymore. The idealistic sword saint forced himself to speak while blocking the Dragon Scale Demon Saint's attack. It doesn't matter whether you care or not. Die. The Dragon Scale Demon Sage, who had transformed into a Bloodline Battle Sage, was slightly stronger than the Demon Sword Sage. The Demon Sword Sage was good at the Sword Dao, but the Demon God was not good at the Sword Dao. Using the Sword Dao to dominate the Bloodline Battle Sage's fighting style was somewhat inconsistent, and the Dragon Scale Demon Sage was not as thorough. With a punch, space-time shattered. The idealistic sword saint used all his strength to break free from the shackles of space-time. His aura grew weaker and weaker. Obviously, after a long battle, his martial yuan spirit was heavily damaged. Idealistic sword saint, I heard that your Sword God Palace has 3 advanced sword skills. You have already comprehended the first and second. Maybe you can kill me after comprehending the third. Why don't you try it? He would not be able to kill Idealism Sword Saint in a short period of time. He did not think that Idealism Sword Saint would be able to comprehend the 3rd high-level Sword Path God skill. His Demon God Palace had 2 high-level Sword Path God skills, but he had only comprehended the first one. Legend had it that if he could comprehend the 2nd high-level Sword Path God skill, he might be able to become a true god. Sword God Palace should be able to comprehend the 3rd high-level Sword Path God skill. Since you want to try, I'll fulfill your wish. The idealistic sword saint suddenly landed on the ground with his hands behind his back. He looked calm. What a joke. You want to scare me? It's still too early. The Dragon Scale Demon Saint sneered and pounced over. Sword way alone. Suddenly, a shocking aura burst forth. With the idealistic sword saint at the center, the Law of Dusk within a radius of several hundred miles retreated. Then, lines of sword-like patterns spread out and covered the sky. Wherever they went, the air, the plants, the sound, and the vital chi became swords. Everything within a radius of several hundred miles could be turned into swords. Even time and space had been turned into swords. The essence of the 3rd advanced sword skill, Sword Way alone, was to condense the laws of Sword Way and use them to replace the laws of chaos and the laws of dusk. This was equivalent to turning the space one was in into one's own home ground. The reason why the chief gods were so strong was because their god laws were strong enough to make the laws of chaos retreat. For example, the demon gods' demon laws, the immortal laws of immortality, and the destruction laws of destruction. As a chief god, the sword god's laws of sword way were not many. They were far inferior to the sword god's laws of sword god, but it was still not something that the dragon scale demon saint could resist. A radius of a few hundred miles was filled with the laws of sword way. The idealistic sword saint stabbed at the dragon scale demon saint. Ah! Dragon scale demon saint screamed. He realized that he couldn't use his diabolical divine skills, and he couldn't even use the nomological laws. The only thing he could use was his divine power, and it was only a portion of his divine power. Under the shroud of the sword principle, the diabolical will in his divine power was sealed. Only the power that didn't go against the sword principle could exist. The appearance of sword way alone allowed the idealistic sword saint to become the #1 sword saint of the sword god palace again. The dragon scale demon saint suddenly became a fish on the chopping board. Crack. However, at this moment, the sword patterns in the void suddenly cracked. Like a deflated balloon, the laws of sword way collapsed and could no longer restrain the dragon scale demon saint's power. The sword that the idealistic sword saint stabbed out did not even penetrate the dragon scale demon saint's defense. It was bounced off, and sparks flew everywhere. The idealistic sword saint spat out large mouthfuls of blood. His entire body aged, and wrinkles appeared on his face. He had only comprehended a little bit of sword way alone. Out of 10 times, he could not use it. This time, he was very lucky to be able to use it. It was a pity that the time he could use it was too short, so short that it was not enough to kill the dragon scale demon saint. Apart from that, the price of using sword way alone was very high. In order to maintain the laws of sword way alone in this short period of time, his god power and martial Parthuanshan had been sucked out by 80 to 90%. This was equivalent to 80 to 90% of his lifespan being sucked out. With so much of his origin being sucked out in such a short period of time, the damage was terrifying. Without the help of a true god, he would not be able to recover in this lifetime. Without becoming a true god, even if he comprehended sword way alone, he would not be able to use it more than a few times. This was what the idealistic sword saint knew. Only those with strong enough god power could use it. Ha ha, ha 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 ha, the dragon scale demon saint laughed. He had almost died under this terrifying third high-level sword way divine skill. It was a pity that fate was on his side and had abandoned him. Idealistic sword saint, what else do you have to say now? Even fate has abandoned you. So, go to hell. Sensing that the idealistic sword saint was in an unprecedentedly weak state, the dragon scale demon saint unleashed his most powerful attack. He punched through space and time. Clang. A sword blocked the dragon scale demon saint's attack. This sword did not belong to the idealistic sword saint. It belonged to Yi Chen. The idealistic sword saint could not be killed. This was Yi Chen's premonition. He had a feeling that if the idealistic sword saint died, the sword god divine system would not be able to reverse the situation. He did not know where this feeling came from. After all, even if the idealistic sword saint did not die, he was just a sword saint, a demigod. What truly determined everyone's fate was a battle between true gods. I will use sword way alone. You kill the two of them. The idealistic sword saint's voice reached Yi Chen's ears. You. Yi Chen hesitated slightly. If the idealistic sword saint used sword way alone again, he would definitely die. I can't be killed. I can only die using the revered way of the sword. Perhaps it's so that you can comprehend the revered way of the sword. I believe you already know that there is a deep connection between us. Everything has a cause and effect. I want to know where our cause is. The idealistic sword saint smiled indifferently. At this moment, he did not have any regrets about dying. Instead, he felt a sense of relief. The demon sword saint and the dragon scale demon saint gathered together. The two of them planned to work together to kill Yi Chen. As for the idealistic sword saint, he was already a cripple in their eyes. However, When a cripple gave up on life, miracles would sometimes happen. Sword way alone. With a low shout, sword patterns spread out from the idealistic sword saint's body. In the blink of an eye, the sword patterns had spread out for hundreds of miles, enveloping the demon sword saint and the dragon scale demon saint. Humph. It's useless. You have only comprehended the surface. This move will collapse soon. The dragon scale demon saint was not shocked. That might not be the case. The idealistic sword saint's figure became illusory. It was as if the sword patterns were formed from his flesh and blood. In the end, the idealistic sword saint's figure was almost undetectable. Even his life aura had almost disappeared. Replacing it was the overwhelming sword Tao laws. With his life as the price, the idealistic sword saint had successfully used sword way alone. I understand. So that's how it is. In the void, the idealistic sword saint's voice came out and reverberated continuously. What did he understand? Yi Chen's expression was solemn. The idealistic sword saint had used his life to find out the answer, but Yi Chen was still clueless. I'll kill them first. No matter what, Yi Chen could not waste the opportunity that the idealistic sword saint had used his life to create. With a flash, Yi Chen attacked the dragon scale demon saint and the demon sword saint. No. The two's strength had been restricted by countless times. How could they be a match for Yi Chen? Their martial Dao Yuan spirits were directly destroyed, and their souls were scattered. They were deader than dead. After killing the two, the sword way alone still did not dissipate. The sword Dao laws covered a radius of hundreds of miles. Some sword sages who had barged in realized that their strength had increased rapidly while the enemy's strength had weakened rapidly. Suddenly, in the void, two sword phantoms shot towards Yi Chen. They were sword souls. One was black, and the other was grey. These two sword souls seemed to have a consciousness of their own. They shot directly into Yi Chen's soul sea, so much so that Yi Chen could not react in time. Is it the idealistic sword saint's darkness sword soul and chaos sword soul? Yi Chen was puzzled. He quickly used his inner vision to look at his soul sea. In his soul sea, waves were surging, and the five great sword souls were resonating with each other. The sword soul was a swordsman's will. The will couldn't be seized. What belonged to others would always belong to others, and it couldn't become one's own. Yi Chen did not know why the idealistic sword saint's sword soul would run into his soul sea. It was unbelievable. Could it be that the idealistic sword saint's sword soul could become his sword soul? As this thought flashed through his mind, a scene that surprised Yi Chen happened. The idealistic sword saint's sword soul was really slowly forming a connection with his soul sea. First was the darkness sword soul. Yi Chen's darkness sword soul was at the late stage rank 9. At this moment, the late stage rank 9 darkness sword soul was absorbing the idealistic sword saint's darkness sword soul. In a short while, Yi Chen's darkness sword soul was perfected, while the idealistic sword saint's darkness sword soul disappeared. Next was the chaos sword soul. Yi Chen's soul sea didn't have a chaos sword soul. First, a trace of chaos sword intent was born. Then, the chaos sword intent absorbed the chaos sword intent that drifted out of the chaos sword soul and gradually took shape, turning into a first-rank chaos sword soul. Second rank, third rank, fourth rank, after an unknown period of time, the fifth supreme sword soul appeared in Yi Chen's soul sea. The idealistic sword saint's chaos sword soul was gone. He has 5 supreme sword souls at the same time, and all of them are perfected. Yi Chen felt like he was dreaming. Who is the idealistic sword saint? Who am I? No matter how strong Yi Chen's will was, he was at a loss at this moment. He was sure that he had never seen the idealistic sword saint before, nor did he have any connection with him. In terms of karma, it was impossible for the two of them to have any karma in this life. This life. Karma. All of a sudden, Yi Chen thought of something. He recalled that his soul had transmigrated. Could it be that his soul had transmigrated and caused something to happen? In the sky above the twilight plain, the true gods were locked in a fierce battle. The starlight was dazzling. Perhaps it was an illusion, but someone noticed that the sky seemed to have been torn apart. Then, a finger pressed down. It was an incomparably huge finger. It was the finger of a true god. The direction in which the finger was pressing was none other than the direction where the swords only shrouded. Chapter 1485. Evil God, you're so shameless. A furious roar came from the sky. Demonic God Celestial System and Sword God Celestial System were originally evenly matched. Sword God Celestial System was even slightly stronger. However, Sword God wasn't present, and a true god of Sword God Celestial System had fallen at the beginning, giving Demonic God Celestial System a huge advantage. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Evil God wanted to eliminate Yi Chen. He felt that Yi Chen had a chance of becoming a true god. The Evil God was one of the top few true gods in the Demon God deity system. Even a finger of his was not something that a demigod could withstand. Even a quasi-god would be easily crushed to death, no different from crushing an ant. The huge finger's momentum was like lightning, and it landed on Yi Chen's head in the blink of an eye. Catcher. Cracks appeared on Sword Daos only, and the Sword Dao laws started to become chaotic. After all, Sword Daos only was not executed by a true god. Wanting to block a true god's attack was simply impossible. In the next moment, the Sword Dao laws shattered, and Sword Daos only collapsed. Just as Yi Chen and some ultimate sword saints were about to be crushed, a sword appeared out of nowhere and blocked the finger. I was wondering why the divine sword chose me. Turns out it was only passed through my hands to Green Lotus Sword Saint. This sword flew out from Sword Saint's storage ring. It was a true divine sword, possessing the might of a quasi-god. Before the ultimate god battle, this sword had chosen Sword Saint, making him exceptionally happy. He thought that the divine sword had chosen him, but he couldn't take it out no matter how hard he tried. Only now did he realize that the divine sword hadn't chosen him, but Yi Chen. Or rather, it had chosen the last person. Why aren't you holding me? The divine sword had a spirit, and it transmitted to Yi Chen. Although the divine sword's might was only at quasi-god level, its body was extremely tough. Even a true god's all-out attack couldn't destroy it. Only a master god could. Evil God's finger was not his full strength, and Evil God was not a master god either. Therefore, the divine sword was able to withstand the attack, but it lacked strength. Although it could temporarily block the finger, it didn't mean that it could withstand it forever. Divine sword. Yi Chen reacted and promptly held the divine sword, pouring a boundless divine power into it. Roar. The divine sword gave off an astonishing sword aura and blocked his finger. Even Yi Chen himself didn't know how strong Yi Chen's current divine power was. After integrating the perfect dark sword intent and the perfect chaos sword intent, Yi Chen's divine power continued to rise. Compared to before, it was more than 1,000 times stronger. Yi Chen had a feeling that his divine power seemed to be stronger than that of a true god. One should know that he wasn't a true god yet. Hey! The evil god's finger had not crushed Yi Chen to death, and he was quite shocked. Even though he had not used his full strength and had only casually attacked without even using a divine skill, he was still an evil god, one of the few true gods below chief gods. Die. The divine power surged, and the power of the finger that the heretic god pressed down increased crazily. With a cracking sound, the ground beneath Yi Chen's feet caved in, and wisps of flames appeared between the finger and the divine sword. I can't hold on any longer. Yi Chen held the divine sword with both hands, trying his best to resist the pressure of the finger. Even so, he could still hear his body crumbling and the sound of his martial yuan spirit being worn down. Fortunately, the divine power that had merged with the 5 supreme sword intents would grow stronger with each setback. As the power of the heretic god's finger increased, the divine power became purer and more vast. If Yi Chen was a volcano, the divine power would be the magma that was about to erupt, and the heretic god's finger would be a huge rock that blocked the volcano's mouth, preventing the magma from erupting. But when the magma's eruption power reached a certain level, no one could stop it. I don't believe it. Withdrawing the finger, the heretic god clenched his fist and punched down. This punch was a divine skill that contained the heretic god's divine power and God's law. Rumble. The twilight plains trembled. The place where Yi Chen was directly sunk into the depths of the earth. With a single glance, it was impossible to tell how deep it was. In the dark void, Yi Chen kept sinking. The heretic god's full force attack seemed to have shattered his consciousness. He kept sinking and drifting. Time seemed to have passed for billions of years, or perhaps an eternity. Who am I? Memory fragments flashed by as Yi Chen's consciousness fluctuated. The fluctuations grew stronger and stronger. Yi Chen struggled, wanting to escape from this place. Sadly, he couldn't even feel his own body. Finally, Yi Chen remembered who he was. At the moment he remembered who he was, Yi Chen saw his own body, the vast heaven realm, and the primal chaos. Within his body, the martial Yuan spirit and the divine power started to fuse. Yi Chen's perception rose infinitely. He had never understood this world so well before, this chaos. A feeling of controlling heaven and earth filled his heart. I am Yi Chen. I am me. In the dark void, a ray of light was born. This ray of light grew brighter and brighter, finally turning into a huge sun that emitted eternal light. This aura. In the sky above the twilight plains, the true gods of the demon god system and sword god system looked down in shock. In the deep pit, a dazzling light burst out. The vast aura made the dusk laws of the twilight plains retreat. This was the aura of a true god. No, this was far beyond a true god's aura. They had only felt such an aura from the Chaos Master God. But in comparison, there were still some differences. This aura was full of offensive power. It wasn't like the Chaos Master God's all-encompassing aura. It's the Chaos Divine Power, Chaos Sword Path Divine Power. The true gods of the Sword God system were surprised. They were sure that this was the Chaos Sword Path Divine Power because it was so similar to the Chaos Master Gods. The Chaos Master God's Chaos Divine Power contained the Immortal Will, the Destruction Will, the Light Will, the Darkness Will, and the Chaos Will. Yi Chen's Chaos Divine Power contained the 5 Supreme Sword Wills. In terms of attributes, they were the same. But its offensive power surpassed that of the Chaos Master God's Chaos Divine Power. Flying out from the deep pit, Yi Chen kept flying upward. He flew to the void above the twilight plains. That was the battlefield of the true gods. Demigods couldn't fly up there. There was endless space between them. Yi Chen's body was extremely huge. His martial path Yuanshan and Chaos Divine Power fused together. Yi Chen broke through the demigod realm and officially became a true god. He had a divine body, and it was the Chaos Sword Path Divine Body. God's Law. The thought flashed in his mind. Yi Chen's 5 elemental laws started to fuse and form the God's Law. Only complementary laws could fuse to form the God's Law. Evil God, courtesy demands reciprocity. Take one of my moves. Facing the evil god, Yi Chen punched. A bright light flashed and a large half of the evil god's giant body was vaporized. The remaining half fell into the twilight plains and smashed a huge pit. I want to see how strong the chaos god power is. The demon god was a head god after all, so he wasn't frightened by Yi Chen's combat strength. The demon path expanded and the demon god pounced towards Yi Chen. Sword swimming Taishu. His body turned into a sword light as Yi Chen headed towards the demon god. Dang! Yi Chen was forced back. With the protection of the demon path, the moment Yi Chen entered the range of the demon path, his combat strength would be greatly reduced. This was the reason why the chief gods couldn't kill him. I see. Yi Chen understood that he couldn't kill the demon god, but he could seal him. Sword Path Supreme. With the Chaos Sword Path God power as the source, Yi Chen formed endless sword path laws. The sword path laws formed by the idealistic sword saint couldn't even be compared to a billionth of Yi Chen's. The sword path laws formed a ball and sealed the demon god within. As long as the Chaos Sword Path God power didn't scatter, the seal couldn't be removed. Even if the Chaos Chief God came personally, it would be useless. Go. With a push, the ball was banished into the chaos. Flee. Seeing that the Chief God was sealed, the remaining true gods all fled. Unfortunately, no matter how fast they fled, they couldn't be faster than Yi Chen's sword path laws. Pu, One by one, the true gods of the demon god system fell and their corpses fell on the Twilight Plains. On this day, the number of true gods that died in the Twilight Plains was unprecedented. The Twilight Plains seemed to have become the dusk of the true gods and was filled with an inauspicious aura. Welcome, Chief God. The true gods of the Sword God system all bowed to Yi Chen. With the Sword God gone, Yi Chen would be the new Chief God and the unprecedented Chaos Sword God. His status wouldn't be any lower than the Chaos Chief God. The Sword God went to a faraway place. You should all return. I have a guest to greet. Yi Chen said lightly. What about below? A true god pointed at the battle on the Twilight Plains. This is also training. Don't worry about them. The demon god system no longer had any true gods, so the battle on the Twilight Plains naturally became training. The true gods were high above and wouldn't care about such trivial matters. After the true gods left, Yi Chen looked into the void. Chaos Chief God, since you're here, why don't you show yourself? Chaos Sword God. An old man walked out of the void. It was the Chaos Chief God. Looking at Yi Chen, the Chaos Chief God sighed. Coincidence is also inevitable. Since you've become the Chaos Sword God, your status won't be lower than mine. I hope you can maintain the order of the chaos and don't destroy it. Yi Chen's current strength was unfathomable. Although the Chief God could use the omnipresent Chaos Law, he couldn't restrict him or even seal him. The Chaos Law wasn't his, after all. It belonged to the Chaos. Yi Chen's Sword Dao Law was enough to make the Chaos Law retreat. It was just that the range wasn't as large. You can stop me from becoming the Chaos Sword God. Yi Chen said. The Chief God shook his head. I can't stop you on the Twilight Plains. The Twilight Law is the final phase of the Chaos Law. Once you're tainted by the Twilight Law, even the Chief God will be in trouble. The evil god interfered in the Twilight Plains and died. Although it was a little fast, it was in line with karma. I see. Yi Chen understood now. It was no wonder that the Twilight Plains became the location of the ultimate divine battle. Here, the true gods wouldn't interfere. If they did, they would only bring bad luck to themselves. The Twilight Law was the final phase of the Chaos Law. Since even the chaos had its final phase, so did the true gods. To the true gods, as long as they didn't die, they would have a chance to rise again. I can tell that you're someone who doesn't like to be left alone. Maybe I'm overthinking. The Chief God of Chaos smiled. The Sword God roamed the chaos and never came back. The Chaos Sword God before him would probably walk the same path. Maybe. Yi Chen looked at the chaos outside the heavenly realm. At the very end, Yi Chen seemed to see something, but at the same time, he didn't see anything. After the Chief God of Chaos left, Yi Chen waved his hand. Xu Jing and Murong Qing Cheng flew up. Yi Chen, you've become the Chaos Sword God? Xu Jing asked hesitantly. That's right. Yi Chen smiled. What about my mother? Xu Jing's mother was still in hell of the Shenhuang cosmos. Ordinary true immortals couldn't go against the law of chaos and head to the Shenhuang cosmos. But Yi Chen was the Chaos Sword God. That's easy. Yi Chen waved his right hand and the law of Sword Dao spread out endlessly. Soon, it reached the Shenhuang cosmos. In hell, Red Lotus Ghostly Lord was pulled out. At the beginning, Red Lotus Ghostly Lord was still a little confused. But as time passed, his memories came back. At the same time, in hell, Xu Jing's father, Golden Supreme Being, who was now a Ghostly Lord, was also pulled out. Yi Chen's parents, Yi Chen's siblings, disciples, Murong Qingqing's parents, and some familiar people. These were all people who had died. Now that Yi Chen was the Chaos Sword God, they were all resurrected. Yi Chen could resurrect people below the demigod level. But the premise was that these people had never left the cosmos. Because only the cosmos had hell. In a place without hell, death was death, and there was no way to resurrect. Rumble. In the void, the law of chaos shrouded over from all directions, trying to cut off the path of the law of Sword Dao. Resurrecting the dead was something that went against the law of chaos. Disperse. Yi Chen waved his left hand and dispersed the law of chaos. Since he had chosen to resurrect, Yi Chen naturally would not compromise. This chaos sword god. Sensing the commotion, the master god of chaos laughed bitterly. Luckily, only a few people were resurrected. If Yi Chen really wanted to resurrect a lot of people, the commotion would be huge, and the karma would be huge, and he would have to intervene. The lifespan of the dead was over. Even if they were resurrected, they would die immediately. For this reason, Yi Chen used the Chaos Sword Dao God power and the law of Sword Dao to open up the Master God space. Within the Master God space, one would not be affected by the cycle of samsara, and one's lifespan would naturally be meaningless. However, there was no possibility of improvement in the Master God space, because it was isolated from the outside world. Once out, one would still die. But for Yi Chen, it was enough. There was nothing perfect in this world, and he could only try his best to be perfect. The divine war had ended many years ago, and the heaven realm had once again returned to peace. In the sky, there were 6 suns, and 2 of them were high up in the sky. There was a stone table in front of him, and on the stone table was a chessboard. The black and white chess pieces seemed to have a mind of their own, moving here and there on their own. As for Yi Chen, his mind was already wandering in Taishu, and his mind was not on the chess pieces. After becoming the Chaos Sword God, Yi Chen knew about his past and present lives. The reason why he had such a heaven-defying comprehension was not because of the fusion of souls, but because when his soul was transmigrated, the Sword God shot a ray of light into his soul, and the Idealism Sword Saint was also shot into his soul. That was when the Idealism Sword Saint first entered the heaven realm. Yi Chen did not know what the ray of light was, but it should be a strange thing in the chaos. This ray of light was originally one, but the Sword God split it into 2, one for himself, and one for the Idealism Sword Saint. When the 2 met, only one could survive, so everything was the Sword God's plan. Sword God, I wonder where you are. Recollecting his thoughts, Yi Chen stood up and left. In the distance, 2 children were playing. When they saw Yi Chen, they flew over. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.